She almost didn't go. The invitation had been sitting on her desk for 4 days, a rooftop gallery opening, the kind of event her agency expected her to attend, and she always found a reason to leave early. Seoul had no shortage of these gatherings. Rooms full of people performing their own interestingness at each other while the city glittered below them like it was in on the joke. She went because her colleague begged her. She planned to stay 40 minutes. She stayed 4 hours, not because of the art. Not because of the crowd or the catering or the particular way Seoul looked from 20 floors up on a clear Thursday evening. She stayed because of a man at the edge of the rooftop who was looking at the skyline like he was solving something, and who said, without introduction or preamble, the strangest thing anyone had said to her since she arrived in this city. "Which building do you think would survive a disaster longest?" She looked at him. He was looking at the skyline. Medium height, quietly put together, the kind of face that got more interesting the longer you looked at it. "Excuse me," she said. "Structurally," he said, still not looking at her. "I think about it at parties. It's more interesting than whatever's happening inside." She looked back at the skyline, considered it seriously, because she was not a woman who gave questions less than they deserved, even strange ones from strangers at rooftop parties. She pointed to a building 3 blocks north. Glass and steel, older than it looked, the kind of construction that didn't announce itself. "That one," she said. He looked where she was pointing. "Wrong," he said. "The bones are good, but the foundation is too shallow for that soil type. You want something that looks less impressive on the surface." "You an architect?" "Something like that." He turned to look at her for the first time. "Jin," he said. "Simone," she said. They argued about buildings for 20 minutes, then about cities. Then about the specific loneliness of living somewhere that wasn't home, and whether that loneliness was something to fix or something to learn from. By the time she looked at her watch, it was 2 hours past when she had planned to leave, and she had finished 2 drinks she barely remembered ordering. She went home thinking about the conversation. Not about him specifically, about the ease of it. The particular frictionless quality of talking to someone who was actually listening. Simone Carter had learned a long time ago that easy was either a gift or a warning. She had not yet decided which this was. If you're already hooked, hit that subscribe button right now and tap the bell. New stories coming out frequently, and this one is just getting started. She was 29 years old and she had been in Seoul for 14 months. She had come for the job, a senior copywriter position at the Seoul office of a global advertising agency. The kind of opportunity that didn't come twice, and that she had worked toward with the focused intensity of someone who had decided early that her career would be the thing nobody could take from her. She was good at it, better than good. She had a talent for language that went beyond craft, an instinct for the exact right word. The sentence built so precisely that it landed like something inevitable. She had also come for another reason. One she had not shared with her agency or her colleagues or the friends back in Atlanta who had thrown her a going-away party and told her Seoul was going to change her life. She kept that reason in a folder on her laptop that she opened sometimes and closed without acting on. She kept it in a photograph of her father that sat on her desk at home, not at the office, just at home, where she was the only one who had to look at it. Marcus Carter had been a businessman. Had been past tense, because he had been gone for 2 years now, and because even before he died the man he had been was not quite the man who survived what happened to him. He had built a technology firm from nothing over 15 years, the specific American story of someone who had more intelligence and determination than resources and had made that work anyway. He had developed a proprietary software system for pharmaceutical supply chain management that was, his lawyers had argued, and the evidence had supported, stolen. The company that stole it had the kind of legal team that made the truth irrelevant. That company was Kang Industries, headquartered in Seoul. She was not here for revenge. She had told herself that so many times it had become a kind of mantra. She was here for the career and the city and the life she was building, and the revenge was not something she was pursuing, it was just something she was adjacent to. Carrying. The way you carried something you hadn't decided what to do with yet. She had a folder. She had documentation her father had gathered in the last years of his life, things that had never made it into the original case, things he had kept telling her mattered even when everyone else had stopped listening. She did not know yet what she was going to do with it. She only knew she was not ready to let it go. She opened her laptop on the Friday after the rooftop party, and the folder was right there where she always left it. She closed it. Opened a design brief instead. Jin had texted that morning. Something small and funny about the building she had picked. He had walked past it and looked at the foundation, and his professional assessment was that she had been slightly less wrong than he initially said. She laughed before she finished reading it. She was not a woman who laughed at phones. She texted back. The weeks that followed had a quality she did not have a precise word for. Accumulative, maybe. The way something built not through dramatic moments, but through the steady addition of ordinary ones, until you looked up one day and realized you were somewhere you hadn't planned to be. They met for coffee that turned into a walk that turned into 3 hours in a small restaurant in Xiandong, where the menu was handwritten, and the tables were too close together, and neither of them noticed because they were too busy talking. He told her about architecture, not the technical version, the philosophical one. The way a well-designed space could shift how people felt without their ever knowing why. The ethics of building something that would outlast you. The specific responsibility of that. She told him about language, about the craft of it, the way a sentence built with real precision was its own kind of structure. About the difference between a word that was correct and a word that was right. About her father vaguely, that he had been a builder too in his way. That she had inherited his belief that the thing you made with your hands and your mind was the most honest version of yourself. Jin listened the way very few people listened, not constructing his response while she talked, just actually there, actually receiving what she said, asking the follow-up question that proved he had heard the thing underneath the thing she'd said. She noticed. She filed it. What she did not notice, could not have noticed, was the phone he kept on silent. The one that lit up 12 times a day with a number he never answered. The way he angled his body slightly away from the windows of public places without appearing to. The name he used when he paid for things in cash. She did not notice any of that. She was too busy noticing him. Across the city, in a building she had walked past 100 times without stopping, a man sat behind a desk and looked at a report that had been placed in front of him that morning. Photographs. A name. A profile assembled with the thoroughness that money bought when it was applied to the specific task of knowing things about people. Chairman Kang Hyun-soo was 63 years old and had not survived this long at the top of one of South Korea's most powerful conglomerates by ignoring things that required his attention. His second son had been living under a false identity for 8 months following their falling out. He had allowed it up to a point because Woo Jin had always needed space to arrive at things in his own time. He was not his brother. He could not be pushed, but this. He looked at the photograph of the woman beside his son. Read the name beneath it, Simone Carter. He read it again. Then he picked up his phone and made 2 calls. The first to his lawyer, the second to his older son. Find out how close it has gotten, he said, and then deal with it. The first thing she noticed was the client. Park Innovations had been 3 weeks from signing. She had done the pitch herself, had sat across from their marketing director and watched the room shift in her favor the way rooms did when the work was genuinely good. The director had shaken her hand at the end and said they would have contracts to her by Friday. Friday came. No contracts. She followed up Monday. Politely, professionally, the follow-up of someone who was not yet worried. The response that came back was vague in the specific way that meant a decision had been made and nobody wanted to be the one to say it directly. They were going in a different direction. They appreciated her time, she noted it. Moved on. The second thing was her apartment. Her lease renewal had been straightforward. She had renewed twice already with no friction, the same landlord, the same terms. This time her landlord called to say he was considering other options for the unit. He was apologetic about it, almost nervous. She asked if there was a problem with her tenancy. He said no. She asked if it was the money. He said no. He said he would be in touch and hung up before she could ask anything else. She put the phone down slowly. 2 things, different areas of her life. The same week, she was not a paranoid person, but she was a pattern recognition person. It was half of what made her good at her job. She sat with it for a day and then filed it in the back of her mind under watch this and went back to work. The third thing was the colleague, David, a fellow copywriter, someone she had lunch with twice a week, and considered a genuine friend in the careful way she made friends in cities that weren't home, came to her desk on a Thursday morning with the expression of someone who had been deciding whether to say something for several days and had finally decided. "Someone has been asking about you," he said. "At the agency. Not a client, someone external, I don't know who, but Myra in HR mentioned it and I thought you should know." She thanked him, kept her face neutral until he walked away. Then she sat very still at her desk for a long moment. Someone is paying attention to me, she thought. And I don't know why. She thought about the folder on her laptop, about Kang Industries 3 miles across the city, about the documentation her father had spent years assembling. Then she thought about gin, about coffee and long evenings, and a man who asked questions that made her feel like the most interesting person in the room. She told herself the two things were not connected. She had no reason to connect them. She pushed it down. Went back to work. She did not tell Jin. Woo Jin's brother arrived on a Saturday morning without warning. Woo Jin opened the door of his apartment, the one he had been renting under a different name for 8 months, the one that felt more like home than anywhere he had lived in the Kang family's orbit, and found Yi-sung standing in the hallway in a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, with the expression of a man who had been sent somewhere he found distasteful and was being professional about it. "Father knows," Yi-sung said, stepping inside without being invited. "About the woman." Jin closed the door, did not turn around immediately. "How? It matter?" Yi-sung moved to the window, looked out at the street below, the ordinary Seoul street, the market stalls, the delivery bikes, the version of the city that Woo Jin had been living in for 8 months while his family existed in a completely different one. "Woo Jin, do you know who she is?" "Her name is Simone. She's a copywriter. She's from Atlanta and she's been in Seoul for her father," Yi-sung said. "Do you know who her father was?" Past tense landed. "Marcus Carter," Yi-sung continued. "The American who spent 4 years attempting to bring Kang Industries into a legal proceeding that would have cost us everything. Who lost. Who spent the years after that loss trying to find another angle." He paused. "Father believes she came to Seoul deliberately. That this," he gestured vaguely at the apartment, at the life Woo Jin had built inside it, "is not accidental." Woo Jin was quiet for a long time. Long enough that Yi-sung turned from the window to look at him. "She doesn't know who I am," Woo Jin said finally. "She thinks I'm a freelance architect named Jin. She has no idea who I'm connected to." Yi-sung looked at him with the expression he had always used when he thought Woo Jin was being naive, not unkind. Just the specific weariness of an older brother who had spent a lifetime being the practical one. "Then you have a more complicated problem than father," he said. "Because she is going to find out, one way or another. I was going to tell her." Jin didn't answer, because the honest answer was that he had been asking himself the same question for 6 weeks and had not found a version of the conversation that didn't end with losing her. "Father wants this ended," Yi-sung said, cleanly, quickly. "Tell father. I know what you're going to say." Yi-sung picked up his jacket. "I'm telling you what he wants. What you do with that is your business." He moved to the door. Paused. "For what it's worth, I don't think she came here for him. I've read the profile. She came for the career." Another pause. "But father has already started moving. Whatever you're going to do, do it quickly." He left. Woo Jin stood in the center of his apartment and looked at nothing for a very long time. He started watching her differently, not with suspicion. He was honest enough with himself to know it wasn't that. It was more like the specific attention of a man who was trying to reconcile two things that didn't fit together and was looking for the seam. His father's version of Simone Carter, and he looked for the signs. The agenda underneath the warmth. The calculation disguised as ease. He found nothing. What he found instead, infuriatingly, completely, with the particular clarity of someone who had been trying not to see something for weeks, was more evidence of what he already knew. She was exactly who she seemed. She was sharp and funny, and occasionally impatient in the way that very intelligent people were impatient when something wasn't keeping up with them. She was private about certain things. He had always sensed the outlines of something she was carrying without knowing its shape, but she was not performing. The warmth was real. The interest was real. The way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't watching was real in a way that made it difficult to breathe properly. She was falling in love with him. He knew it the way he knew things he wished he didn't know, with complete certainty and no idea what to do with it, because he was falling too. Had been falling since a rooftop and a wrong answer about a building and a conversation that had no reason to go on as long as it did, except that neither of them wanted it to stop. He had told himself it was interesting, then that it was enjoyable, then that it was important. He had run out of smaller words for it. He needed to tell her the truth. He made the decision on a Tuesday evening walking back from her apartment, soul moving around him in the particular way it moved at night, layered and lit and indifferent to individual urgency. He would tell her, this week. He would find the right moment and he would tell her everything and he would let her decide what it meant. He had made the decision 4 times before. This time felt different. This time his father's people had already started moving. And he knew, with a certainty that sat cold in his chest, that he was running out of time to be the one who told her first. Halfway through and this story is only getting more complicated. Hit that like button if you're invested. It keeps this channel going and means more stories like this one. Now let's keep going. The woman arrived at Simone's office on a Wednesday afternoon. She was elegant in the specific way that money that had been in a family for generations made people elegant, not flashy, just precise. Late 50s. Composed in the way that people were composed when they had spent decades in rooms where composure was a form of power. She introduced herself as a representative of a private family and sat down across from Simone's desk without being invited to sit. She placed an envelope on the desk. Simone looked at it, did not touch it. "What is this?" she said. "An offer," the woman said. "The family I represent is prepared to cover any and all financial losses sustained by Marcus Carter during and following the 2018 legal proceedings, in full, with interest." She paused. "In exchange for your immediate and permanent departure from Seoul and the termination of your current personal relationship." Room was very quiet. Simone looked at the envelope for a long moment. Then she looked at the woman. "Which family?" she said. The woman said a name, Kang Hyun-soo. Something moved through Simone that had no clean name. Not surprise exactly. More like the specific feeling of a thing you had been half expecting arriving in a shape you hadn't fully anticipated. The stone she had been carrying for 6 years shifted in her chest. She thought about Jin, about coffee and buildings and long evenings, and the way he had listened to her talk about her father, vaguely, carefully. Never the full story, with the specific attention of someone for whom it genuinely mattered. She thought about the name Kang, Jin, she said slowly. "What is Jin's full name?" Woman's expression answered before her words did. Simone looked at the envelope on her desk for one more moment. Then she picked it up and held it out across the desk. "Out of my office," she said quietly. The woman took the envelope, stood, moved to the door with the composure of someone who had delivered bad news before and knew how to leave a room after it. At the door she paused. "The offer has a 72-hour window," she said. "After that it is withdrawn." "It was withdrawn the moment you sat down," Simone said. The door closed. Simone sat at her desk and did not move for a long time. Then she opened her laptop, pulled up everything publicly available on Kang Woo-jin, the second son, the one who had dropped out of the public eye 8 months ago following what the business press described vaguely as a family disagreement. The photographs in the articles were formal, older, the stiff corporate version of a person. But it was him. The jaw, the way he held himself. Unmistakably, undeniably him. She closed the laptop. She opened her desk drawer and took out the photograph of her father. Looked at it for a long time. "I'm sorry, Dad," she said quietly. This got complicated. She sat with the full weight of it. The man she was in love with was the son of the man who had destroyed her father, who had been lying to her about who he was since the night they met on a rooftop and argued about buildings. She should feel only one thing about this. She felt approximately 7 things simultaneously, and none of them were clean. She picked up her phone, typed carefully, "We need to talk, tomorrow, our usual place." She sent it, put the phone face down. Then she opened her laptop again, not the public search this time. The folder, the one she had been carrying since Atlanta. She opened it and read through it slowly, carefully, for the first time in months. Her father had been right. She had always known he had been right. And now she was sitting across a city from the family that had made sure it didn't matter that he was right, and she was in love with one of them, and the documentation that could change everything was sitting in a folder on her laptop, and she had 72 hours to decide what kind of person she was going to be. She read until midnight. Then she closed the laptop. Went to bed, did not sleep. She arrived at the restaurant at 7. It was their usual place, small, quiet, the kind of Seoul restaurant that had been in the same location for 30 years and had no interest in being discovered by anyone who hadn't already found it. She had loved it from the first time he brought her here. She loved it slightly less now. Knowing that everything she had associated with it had been built on a foundation she hadn't been shown, she pushed the door open and stopped. The table where they always sat had more people at it than she had expected. Woo Jin was there, standing, which meant he had seen her come in, which meant he already knew something was wrong. Beside him, a man she had never seen before, older, with the particular bearing of someone accustomed to managing situations. Two other men flanked the table with the specific stillness of people who were there to witness something rather than participate in it. Woo Jin's expression when he saw her face told her that whatever was about to happen had not been his idea. The man beside him stood. "Ms. Carter," he said, "please sit down." "I don't know you," she said. "My name is Kang Yi-sung," he said. "I'm Woo Jin's brother. Please sit down." She did not sit down. She stood at the entrance of the restaurant with her bag over her shoulder and looked at the table and made a very quick calculation about what was happening and why and what it was designed to accomplish. Public setting, witnesses. An older brother sent to handle something the father didn't want to handle himself. She had seen this kind of move before, not in her own life but in her father's. The strategic use of a room to make a private matter feel institutional. To make the person on the receiving end feel small and managed and outnumbered. She was not going to sit down. "What you came to say," she told Yi-sung. "Standing is fine." Something shifted in his expression, a recalibration brief. He had expected a different response. She noted his expectation and filed it. He spoke clearly and at a volume designed to carry to the nearby tables without appearing to be designed that way. He told her who Woo Jin was, his real name, his family, the conglomerate, the scale of it. He moved through the facts with the precision of someone who had rehearsed, and then he came to the part she could see he considered the centerpiece, the piece designed to humiliate, to reframe everything she thought she had been living for the past 2 months as something she should be ashamed of. He told her about her father, about the lawsuit, about the connection between Marcus Carter and Kang Industries. He framed it as revelation, as concern for her, as information she deserved to have. What it actually was, dressed up in that framing, was a public dismantling. A suggestion, delivered in front of witnesses, that she had been naive at best and calculating at worst. That whatever she had thought was happening between her and Woo Jin was built on a foundation of deception on both sides. He finished. The restaurant was very still. She let the silence sit for exactly the right amount of time. Then she looked at him, not at Woo Jin yet, at Yi-sung, with the expression she had developed over years of being the only person in rooms that hadn't expected someone like her to be there. "Are you finished?" she said. Yi-sung blinked. "I think you should consider. I asked if you were finished." He stopped. She looked at Woo Jin. He was looking back at her with an expression she had not seen on him before, not guilt exactly, something more complicated. The expression of a man watching something unfold that he had tried to prevent and had failed to prevent in time and was now standing inside the consequence of. "Were you ever going to tell me?" she said. Her voice was even. The restaurant was very quiet around them. "The truth, your name, all of it. Or no?" A pause, something moved in his face. "Yes," he said. "I was trying to find the right." "I know who you are," she said. The room stilled further. "I found out yesterday," she continued. "From the woman your father sent to my office with a check and a 72-hour deadline." She paused. "Let that land. I also know what your family did to mine. I have known about Kang Industries since before I stepped off the plane in Seoul. I have known for 6 years what that company took from my father and what it cost him." Yi-sung's composure shifted visibly. This was not the shape the conversation was supposed to take. Woo Jin was very still. "What does that mean?" he said quietly. "Simone." "What does that mean?" She looked at him. At the genuine uncertainty in his face, not the performed uncertainty of someone buying time, the real kind. The kind that meant he actually didn't know. That whatever he had been told about her, whatever his father's version of Simone Carter looked like, it had not included this. "Good. It means," she said, "that we need to have an honest conversation, just the two of us. Not your brother, not your father's representatives." She picked up her bag more firmly. "When you're ready to have it, you know where to find me." She turned and walked out of the restaurant. Behind her she heard Yi-sung say something. She did not hear Woo Jin respond. She pushed through the door into the Seoul evening and walked, not fast, not slow, the deliberate pace of a woman who was completely in control of the only thing she could currently control, which was herself, and did not stop until she was 2 blocks away and the restaurant was behind her and the city was just the city again, loud and indifferent and enormous. Then she stopped, exhaled. let her hands unclench at her sides. Her heart was going very fast. She had not let it show. She was allowing it now, privately, in a gap between two buildings on a sole street where nobody knew her name. She had done what she came to do. She had not let them make her small. Now she had to go home and wait and see if he came. He came at 9:30. She heard the knock and opened the door, and he was standing there without his jacket. She had never seen him without his jacket outside. It was a small detail. It landed anyway, with the expression of a man who had walked a long way to get to this door, and was not entirely sure what waited on the other side of it. She stepped back. He came in. They sat across from each other at her kitchen table, the small round one she had bought at a market in her second month in Seoul, because it reminded her of the table in her father's kitchen, the one where they had sat on Sunday mornings, and he had told her about the things he was building, and she had believed, the way children believed, that the things people built with their hands and their minds were safe from the world. She let him go first. He told her everything. His real name, spoken fully for the first time in 8 months. His family, the scale of it, the weight of it. The specific suffocation of growing up as the second son of a man whose idea of love was expectation. The falling out with his father, a disagreement about the direction of the company that had become something larger, a confrontation about the kind of person Woo Jin was willing to be in service of the Kang name. He had walked away. Not permanently. He had told himself not permanently, but completely, needing to exist outside of that identity long enough to figure out who he was when it wasn't the first thing people knew about him. He had been doing that. And then he met her on a rooftop and argued about buildings for 20 minutes, and everything he had been telling himself about what this period of his life was, for had rearranged itself around a new center without his permission. I kept finding reasons not to tell you, he said. Every time I decided I would, I found a reason to wait one more week, one more conversation, one more evening. He looked at his hands on the table. Not because I was using you, because I was terrified of losing you before you'd had enough time to know who I actually was underneath the thing I was hiding. She listened to all of it without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she told him about her father. Not the lawsuit version, the human one. Marcus Carter at his kitchen table on Sunday mornings, explaining the things he was building with the particular joy of someone who had made something real from nothing. Marcus Carter in a courtroom watching 4 years of his life get dismissed by a legal team that had been specifically designed to make truth irrelevant. Marcus Carter in the years after, smaller somehow, not in body but in spirit, the specific diminishment of a man who had believed in the system that had failed him, and could not find a way to stop believing in it even after it had. Marcus Carter at 61, 2 years ago, in a hospital bed in Atlanta, holding her hand and telling her the documentation was in the folder on his computer, and that it mattered, and that somebody someday needed to do something with it. I came to Seoul for the job, she said. That was real. The career, the opportunity, all of it was real. She paused. But I also came because I needed to be in the same city as the thing that broke him. I don't fully know what I thought that would do for me. I just knew I couldn't stay in Atlanta with the folder and do nothing forever. You know who I was when we met? He asked. His voice was careful. She could hear him trying not to load the question with what he needed the answer to be. No, she said. I had no idea you existed until yesterday. He exhaled quietly, the exhale of someone who had been holding something without fully knowing it. And if you had known, he asked, she held that honestly, did not reach for the answer that made her look cleanest. I don't know, she said. I would like to think I would have walked away, but I've been sitting with this for 24 hours trying to find something clean to feel about it, and I can't, because the person I fell in love with is real. Whatever name he was using, something happened in his face. She kept going before it could become something she couldn't finish through. Now tell me the part you haven't told me yet, he said quietly. She looked at him. What part? The part that made you apologize to your father last night. He paused. I was outside your door for 10 minutes before I knocked. I heard you say it. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she stood up, went to her desk, came back with the laptop. She opened the folder. My father spent the last 3 years of his life gathering this, she said. Things that never made it into the original case. Internal communications, financial records, evidence of deliberate concealment. She turned the laptop toward him. I don't know what I was going to do with it. I still don't fully know. But you asked for the part I hadn't told you, and this is it." He looked at the screen. She watched him read, watched his face move through the first document, and then the second, and then stop on the third, which was the one that named names, which was the one her father had considered the most important and had been the most careful about. He read it twice. Then he looked up at her. "Show me all of it," he said. "This is the moment everything changes. If this story has you locked in, hit that like button right now. Let's finish this." She showed him all of it. He went through every document slowly, with the attention of someone who understood what he was reading and understood its implications, and was not trying to minimize either. She sat across from him and watched him read and felt the particular vulnerability of having given someone the most important thing you were carrying and waiting to see what they did with it. He closed the laptop, was quiet for a long time. "This is enough," he said. His voice was different, lower, more certain. "With the right attorney, this is enough to reopen everything, to go back to the original case and demonstrate deliberate fraud." "I know," she said. "My father will fight it with everything he has." "I know that too." He looked at her. "Why are you showing me this? I'm his son. I could take this to him tonight and you would never see these documents again." She held his gaze without flinching. "Because I don't think you will," she said. "Because my father spent the last years of his life believing that nobody on that side of it had any integrity at all. I want to find out if he was wrong." Apartment was very still around them. Outside, the window soul did its nighttime thing, layered and lit, and completely indifferent to the size of what was happening inside this small kitchen with its round table and its two people and its open laptop. Woo Jin looked at her for a long moment. "He was wrong," he said. "About at least one of us." The attorney's name was Park Soo-yeon. She was 52 years old, had spent 20 years in corporate litigation, and had a reputation in Seoul's legal community for taking cases that other firms considered too complicated and winning them with the specific thoroughness of someone who found complexity interesting rather than discouraging. Woo Jin had known her for years. She had done work for Kang Industries once briefly, before a disagreement about methodology that had ended the relationship, and apparently left no hard feelings on her side. She agreed to meet them on a Friday morning. Simone spread the documents across the conference table and watched Soo-yeon read them with the same careful attention Woo Jin had given them 3 nights ago in her kitchen. The attorney asked precise questions. She did not express surprise at the content, the specific professional composure of someone who had stopped being surprised by what powerful people did to protect themselves a long time ago. At the end of the meeting, she looked at both of them across the table. "This is viable," she said. "I want to be honest with you about what viable means in this context. It means winnable. It also means expensive, slow, and very loud. The Kang legal team will respond to this filing within hours of it being submitted, and they will respond with everything they have." She paused. "Mr. Kang, your father will treat this as a personal betrayal. I want you to understand that before we proceed." "I understand it," Woo Jin said, "and you're prepared for what that means, for the family, for your position within it." "Been outside my position within it for 8 months," he said. "I'm not going back to it regardless of this case." Soo-yeon looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at Simone. "And you understand that this process will take time, possibly years. The outcome is not guaranteed despite the strength of the documentation." "My father spent years on it knowing the outcome wasn't guaranteed," Simone said. "I think I owe him at least the same commitment." Soo-yeon nodded once, gathered the documents. "I'll have a preliminary assessment to you by Wednesday," she said. They walked out of the building into a gray Seoul morning and stood on the pavement for a moment without speaking. Simone looked at the street, at the ordinary Thursday morning texture of a city that had no idea what had just been set in motion inside the building behind them. "Are you okay?" Woo Jin asked. She thought about it honestly. "I don't know yet," she said. "Ask me in a week." He looked at her. "In a week I'll still be asking." She looked back at him. Something settled in her chest, not quite peace, not yet, but the specific solidity of a decision made completely, without reservation, in the full knowledge of its cost. "Let's get coffee," she said. They walked. The fallout from the filing came faster than Soo-yeon had predicted. Kang Hyun-soo did not call Woo Jin. He did not send Yi-sung. He released a statement through the company's communications office, measured, corporate, the language of controlled damage, that described the legal action as without merit and the documentation as fabricated. The statement did not mention Woo Jin by name. It did not need to. Everyone who needed to understand what had happened understood it. Yi-sung called on a Tuesday evening. Woo-jin picked up. The conversation was brief and not entirely unkind. Yi-sung was not a cruel man, he was a practical one, and even his practicality had its limits. He told Woo-jin that their father was not going to forgive this quickly, that the position Woo-jin had held within the company, even the diminished, contested version of it, was gone, that the family would present a unified front publicly, and Woo-jin should not expect to be included in that front. "I know," Woo-jin said. "Is she worth it?" Yi-sung asked, not cruelly, genuinely. Woo-jin was quiet for a moment. "That's the wrong question," he said. "It was never about whether she was worth it. It was about whether I was willing to be the person who looked at that documentation and did nothing." Long pause. "Father won't see it that way," Yi-sung said. "I know," Woo-jin said again. After he hung up, he sat in his apartment, the one he had been renting under a false name for 8 months, the one that was more home than anywhere the Kang name had ever put him, and looked at the ceiling and felt the specific weight of a door closing behind him that he had opened himself and closed himself and was at peace with having closed. He picked up his phone, texted Simone. Yi-sung called. "I'm fine. How's the brief going?" Her response came within a minute. A paragraph about the client, a complaint about a headline that wasn't landing, a question about whether he had eaten. He smiled before he finished reading it. He ordered food for 2 and went to meet her. If this story has moved you, subscribe right now if you haven't already and hit that bell. This is exactly the kind of story this channel was built for. Let's finish it. 6 months later. The legal proceedings were in their early stages, methodical, slow building with the careful momentum of a case that had been assembled over years and was now being given the room to breathe that it had never had the first time. Soo-yeon sent updates on Wednesdays. They were always precise and always honest, and Simone had started to understand, through the language of them, that her father had been right. Not just about what had been done to him, about what the documentation could do if it found the right hands. It had found the right hands. She was still at the agency, still in Seoul. She had a new apartment, hers entirely, chosen for herself, on a street in Mapo that got good light in the mornings, and had a coffee shop on the corner whose owner had started leaving her usual order ready when he saw her coming. She had put her father's photograph on the wall above her desk, not the formal one, a different one, a photograph she had found in a box in Atlanta before she left. Her father at maybe 40, laughing at something off camera, the building he had started from, nothing visible behind him. The one he had believed in. The one she was slowly doing something about. She was on the phone with Soo-yeon when Woo-jin walked in. He had a key. This was a relatively recent development, 3 weeks old, arrived without ceremony, offered and accepted in the specific way that things happened between them, which was directly and without excessive performance. She held up one finger. He went to the kitchen. She heard the refrigerator open, the sound of him locating and evaluating its contents with the particular focus he brought to everything he did. She finished the call. "Progress," she said, coming into the kitchen. "Soo-yeon thinks the internal communications are going to be the thing. The ones that show the concealment was deliberate from the beginning." "Good," he said. He had found ingredients, was doing something with them that smelled like it was going to be better than whatever she would have made herself. This was a consistent pattern she had stopped pretending to resist. "Your father's team filed another motion yesterday," she said. "I know, Soo-yeon copied me. You okay?" He looked up from what he was doing, met her eyes across the kitchen. "Yes," he said, simply. The way he said things that were true and didn't require elaboration. She looked at him for a moment. This man whose real name she now knew completely, whose family was currently on the opposite side of a legal proceeding she was driving, who had handed her documentation that had cost him his position and his father's approval, and the version of his future that had been planned for him, since before he was old enough to have opinions about it. Who had done all of that and then texted her about a client brief and shown up in her kitchen and made dinner with whatever was in the refrigerator like it was the most natural thing in the world, which she thought it was. "Need to tell you something," she said. He set down what he was holding. Gave her his full attention, the complete, unhurried attention that had made her trust him on a rooftop before she knew his name. "Folder," she said. "The documentation. I want you to know something about why I showed it to you. You wanted to know if I had integrity," he said. "That was part of it." She paused. "The other part is that I had been carrying it alone for 2 years and I was tired. I was so tired of carrying it alone." She looked at him. I showed it to you because I trusted you, not as leverage, not as a test, just because you were the person I trusted and I needed to put it down somewhere." He was quiet for a moment. "I know," he said. "You know? I knew when you showed it to me," he said. "That's why I read every page." She looked at him. He looked back. Outside, the kitchen window Seoul was doing its evening thing, the lights coming on across the city, the sky behind the towers going from gray to deep blue to the specific dark that this city did differently from every other city she had ever been in. She had come here carrying her father's unfinished story and a folder, and a grief she hadn't known how to put down. She had found a man on a rooftop who asked the wrong question about the wrong building and had somehow, in the space between two people's secrets and two people's truths, become the person she put things down with. She had not planned any of it. She was done being surprised by that. "Food is going to burn," she said. "No, it isn't," he said, but he turned back to the stove. She sat at the kitchen table, the small round one that reminded her of Sunday mornings and her father's voice, and the things people built when they believed in what they were making, and watched him cook and felt, for the first time in a very long time, like everything that was supposed to happen next was actually going to happen. If you made it to the end, thank you. Subscribe if you haven't already, hit the bell, and drop a comment below.